Good morning. It's good to be here this morning and to talk about my favorite subject. I was going to do this presentation because it's just about a half an hour, and I'm used to doing 8 hours or 40-hour presentations on training. So I'm just trying to think, what could I say in 30 minutes that will make a change or that you'll be able to take away from this? But if anyone is interested, this is my passion and what I like, and so there's a way more behind this, and I'm open to sharing with anyone on if there's a tidbit here that you like to learn, or there's something else that you'd like to see if I have any experience that I can share with it. Feel free to contact me about it. But I'd like to start out with just a little story. I worked in a nuclear power plant for 17 years in a lot of different positions, and the plant was the oldest one in the U.S., and finally it was time to close and put it to bed. And so I had a choice to continue in the nuclear world or pick a new career. So a group of us decided that we would leave the nuclear industry and go become energy engineers. And we work for a utility company, so they gave us a chance to get embedded, they call it, put us in some of their large customers and find energy. Well, I found out what I wanted to be when I grew up. That was it. After the nuclear world, where you take a stack of paper this high to change a light switch, to ones that there was just projects everywhere and you could make an impact. And some of the things that I found out is, being an energy engineer, you save your company or your clients money. That helps them to be happy. So there's a happy environment to start with. And then you reduce energy waste. So that's good for the environment, the community. Reduce pollution emissions. That's another good one. I've had a chance to get awards, but almost none of the awards were anything about energy. They're usually about emissions. And because saving energy has such a big impact on emissions, that it turns out that it's a really good thing on helping the world from pollution-wise. Then I like engineering, so it's there's a lot of engineering involved in energy engineering. That part's fun. And as was mentioned earlier, it's a big blend of finance. And I think maybe what I've learned over the years is engineers don't get quite enough finance training. We get a lot of training about engineering, but not about finance. And as you'll see in some of the things I talk about, finance is the thing. The engineering is kind of secondary. If you can design all kinds of good stuff. If it can't be financed and paid for, then we call it credenzaware. It becomes just a report that sits on the stage. And I've been collecting credenzaware for my customers for years and wonder what happened, what went wrong with this situation. How did someone put this much to build a book or a report into a company just to have it not be done? It's because we missed the point right from the beginning. And so then there's another part, and it's psychological or political. It's change management. So it's this combination. You get to be a finance person, you get to be an engineer, you get to be a change management agent. So there's more parts of that in working with people. But then there were some other good things that I didn't realize that was going to come out of this. It's an opportunity to travel. What other job do you get to have 4 million frequent flyer miles to give to your children so they can go on vacations? And unlimited hotel spends because you have so many hotel points, and rental cars for free. So my children have really been thankful for the job in that aspect. Not so much that I was gone a lot, but the aspect they're grown now, and so they have their own children, and they can come visit me or follow me or go on vacations because of the miles. So that's been nice. The other part is you meet a lot of great people with this organization and other places. I've been really fortunate. Got to work in 28 countries, did evaluations of a little over 1,000 factories. But it's not like when you're a tourist, you go to Paris or you go to Disney World. You go to a factory that's in the eastern side of the Czech Republic, and you live in somebody's house because there might not be a hotel there, and you stay for a month while you're evaluating. You get to know the people, and then on the weekends they take you to see their families. And there's just so many stories over the years that build up from these opportunities, and it's people who have the same interests. So that's kind of fun too, and it's a fun interest because it does these other good things. And the final, it's kind of important, and my wife reminds me of this too. We get paid for it. She says, Thomas, you have to come home from your playground. Don't forget, but it is nice to be able to get paid for doing some fun things. It's not just you're just doing that on the side. Wanted to talk quickly as I go through the first part of this about some rules that I've learned. How many of you had this in school, this formula? Nobody, I know. Well, the story behind it is, a few years back, I don't know, I lose track of the time pretty easy. This company called me up, and it was Archer Daniels Midland. I didn't even know what Archer Daniels Midland was, ADM. Turns out that they were just this really big company that just their energy spend alone was $1.5 billion. The air compressor room for one factory that makes one product was larger, used more energy than the nuclear plant that I worked at. So one-fourth of that room used more energy than the Atlanta airport that was just filled, the entire airport, just a handful of the air compressors. So that's just one of many, many plants. And so they called and said that they determined they need a corporate energy manager and that they don't have a corporate energy department. Would you interview? And I did, and they accepted me, and I got the chance to go to this unbelievably high energy use company that has plants all around the world. So the fun part about that, it doesn't matter if you're working at a little plant, a big plant, a small building, or whatever. It's just there's percentages of savings that you can get from it. But it's a whole lot more fun when we do a percent of savings and it's $10 million instead of a percent of savings that's $100. So there was fun about this, and I did it for a while. And anyways, this person now is Juan Luciano, who is a CEO now, but he was a COO at that time. When I first got hired, he came in and wrote this thing on the board, and this is the formula he gave me. Results does not equal no results plus a good story. So here's a really good way to start. You just get hired and you get put in front of the board, and they're going to tell you this is what we think, and then they want to know how much savings are you going to bring to our company tomorrow. It's a monster company just like Atlanta. It takes a while to study all that and figure it out, but they wanted to know an answer. But anyways, I thought this is kind of a unique acronym, and I've been able to use it with quite a few of the groups that I work with because this sort of sets the standard. It doesn't want you to say, well, I designed a really good project, but the payback wasn't there. Well, who made the mistake? I mean, that's the good story was I designed a really good project and the payback wasn't there, but that's not the thing. Results is what they're looking for. So Juan Luciano gave this thing, and so the senior vice president of the company said he can't really sit down, not say something, and he's a pretty talkative person. So he got up and wrote another thing on the board, and he put this rule to me. Patience is not a virtue. This has been pretty important because energy savings is really time related. For instance, let's say that when does the clock start ticking when an energy project starts? Let's say that you have an idea for an energy project. Well, idea is not quite there, but once you define it and you know what is the savings, now the clock is ticking. As long as you're not getting the savings, what are you getting? Loss. When we first started, when we left the nuclear plant and went to some big General Motors plants, in order to get the thing moving, we started making these big lists of projects and they weren't getting done. We made a clock, like the thing about that shows the money that the government is spending. Well, we had a clock at how much you're losing because you didn't do our projects. And it was just growing and growing and growing into the millions of dollars at some of the big General Motors plants. Well, time is related to that. So how long it takes to implement, if a project is a savings project and it saves $10,000 a month, every month that you don't get the project done, you've lost $10,000 of opportunity. And that thinking a lot of times doesn't go through with projects. And so I've made a big emphasis when I work with projects and things, how fast can we get the project done? How impactful is the time? And who are the decision makers? And how much time are they going to get to make the decision, yes or no? And do they really know how much time their decision making is? Lots of them don't realize that, I'm going to tell you next month. In some big projects, that can be tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. That you're going to spend $100,000 because you can't make this decision today, or you're going to put it off because we're going to have this time lag. Another thing I had to do, and this has been a really important part to me, I come to customers, and Archer Daniels Midland was one of them, is they already had a strong energy program. And they had a curve that just shows going downhill energy savings like crazy, building new large cogeneration plants, really high-tech ones, 300 megawatt size plants. So these weren't just little plants. They were putting them in each one of their big facilities, and they saw their energy costs going down. So why do we need an energy engineer to run here? Look how good we're doing. So I needed to have something to say because They were doing really good. So why do you need me? So if you look at this graph a little bit, you'll see the solid line going up, and that's the savings. Let's take any customer and say that they are doing good. Well, that is the line. Yes, you're going down this path, and it's going uphill. You're doing savings, and you're going to make it. That's good. So what could I bring to the table? Well, what if I could get the savings done faster, or maybe even add some more to it? But what if I could get it done sooner? You had a target for instance, in 2026 to have 15% of your energy spend done. What if we could get it done by 2022 or 2018? What would that be worth? Well, in ADM, this was worth a lot, and it was that difference. The difference between the dotted line and the solid line, where the green is the dollars, that was $250 million a year. And we made it. We made it we did it in half the time of the goal in this. And back then when we were working on these projects. So it became on their corporate report, the front page of the corporate report for the end of the year was, we made it this in a few years. By accelerating, putting things towards it. But this has been a useful tool, because what value is an energy engineer or energy company going to bring to something? If you're already doing good, you got to be bringing some value, and you got to be able to show it. So this is the type of tool I've been using. I got another rule. Remember those other two? They came up and they said resource, or the formula, then patience is not a virtue. So I'm new, but I still didn't hesitate at all. I went up on the board and wrote my line too. I said, yes, it's really good that you have to get things done, and you got to get them done quickly, but you have to resource according to value. This means you don't set your plans based on what's the engineer's calendar and what opportunity does the engineer on your company have over the next year. You say, oh, he's not going to start working on this till next November because he has this thing to put in, and he has a full calendar, and then there's a vacation here, and this guy's going to be retiring, and then you build your calendar and what you're going to do off of that. It's the opposite of that. It's resource according to value. If what you're going to do has enough value, then you can find the resources. The world's full of resources to fix something. But what I've found in so many companies is they just take the fixed resources that they got, they're already busy, and I usually, in a group of engineers, like if I started with a company, I ask everyone in the group, how many of you have a full-time job? And they raise their hand. How many of you have a lot of extra time to work on something new? They usually don't raise their hands at all. They're already full. So we're going to take an intensive energy program, and we're going to just say, let's add that on top of your work. Do it during your night when you're sleeping, or do it during lunch. That's not how it should be. And that's the part that is important to get across in the beginning is who's the resources going to be to do stuff, and how are we going to assign it. But if you have the value determined, then you have a chance that if you got the value determined, you can say, this value will pay for these resources, even if you have to outsource it. You guys had a great lead into this slide earlier. I strongly believe in leveraging utility incentive programs. It's like getting checks. And this one's even more strange, because this was a program in one utility. It was Ameren Electric in Southern Illinois. And I said, they had a program, and I didn't have a big staff when I started with ADM. So just this thing came in the mail. Do you need help with your energy programs? There's a rebate program that will work. I said, I need a lot of help. So I organized myself and other people. We had tables like this. We were filling out the forms like a assembly line, applying for projects, and you can see the graph going up. Overall, this chart's a little bit old, but you can see the last year, we got $5 million back in 1 year. Overall, $8 million back in utilities. About 90% of all the utility incentive funds given to Southern Illinois, to the whole Ameren territory, we got back. They asked me to give a presentation to the customers, but they said I can't tell them how much that we got back, because they'll think that they don't have a chance because we're using up all the money. So we had to give the presentation without any dollars. But it is interesting. I was able to use the incentive funds because you got a resource according to value. Well, I knew there was value, but I didn't have it specifically. Which comes first, chicken or the egg? I needed some way to do it. So I showed that there's this incentive program, and I was able to take it to the corporation and say, if we just get this many kilowatts saved, they're going to give us this. I need a temporary loan from the COO inside of the company that says, I will get to here, and then they're going to write us a check. So I did a couple samples, and we got checks, and then he kept increasing the amount of money that we get. And we have lots of pictures with our teams holding big checks for $1 million, $2 million, and that really makes teams happy. And then we can advertise it, and it gets more people motivated, and it just snowballed across the company to do it. So the incentive programs were good for morale, they were good for motivation, and they were good for securing the energy team, because the energy team was cash flow positive just from the incentive fund. So we were able to show that as an energy team we weren't costing, so we were able to hire 12 energy engineers and put them around and pay for them with rebates. So it worked out good for that. I have another rule that I have is because a lot of companies, and ADM was one of them, but many of the companies I work with, they're quite independent. That means we do everything ourselves. But again, the thing is, how busy are you? Do you have a lot of extra time? I've done a lot of air compressor studies, and that would be an example. We're going to need a new air compressor system, and they're going to use a plant engineer to put it in. And I asked the plant engineer, how many air compressor systems have you put in your life? Well, none. Well, I can look it up in the book and see how to do it. And I said, well, I've done like 1,000 air compressor studies, and I made a living off of undoing what you guys have been doing. So you just put the stuff together wrong because you don't know better. What's wrong with hiring somebody who's put in hundreds of air compressor systems and figured it out and use them? And if you want, because you might do another one, you glue yourself to this consultant and you stick there right with them and learn from him and use that instead of sending someone off to school, learn on the job. Get your internal people to learn from that by sticking them to the consultant, but don't be afraid to use an expert and get the stuff in right. So I just kind of have a general rule of thumb. If I'm going to use an expert, I want to put the expert's feet to the fire and say, I gotta end up with $4 of actual savings, not theoretical savings. So expert, you're going to be on my team, but you're going to help me too. If we're going to do something, we'll pay for the expert, but the results is going to have to be real projects. Otherwise, we're not going to keep using you. I mean, you can't do this in the first round. You have to do some testing, but this methodology has worked really good for me for hundreds and hundreds of projects, large and small. Is I get the consultant or the expert to work with me with some rules like this, and we have to be able to get the projects approved, so we got to understand the whole picture for that. Another rule, it's okay to reverse engineer. You might think, well, that's a little bit cheating. And in school, you probably went to high school or in middle school, and you're not allowed to copy. Well, if you work in manufacturing especially, which is most of my world, if you don't watch what's going on out there and you don't copy in the sense of look what's out there and see if I can learn from that and do something better, pretty soon you're not going to be there anymore. And the same thing is, reverse engineering would be, if I hire a company to put something in, I don't want them to just add up all the pieces from the book and say, oh, it's going to cost you $450,000 to do this project. And it'll come out to be a 6-year payback. And I already told them that our payback threshold is 4 years. So what kind of engineer are you? Just add up the pieces. I wanted you to go backwards. Here's my 4-year payback threshold. Figure out how I can do the project inside of that or go away. But don't just come back and give me a thing that's outside of my bounds, hand it to me and say, this is how much it costs. So you may have to use used equipment. Maybe you'll have to do like this 80-20 rule. Maybe you'll have to do just 80% of what I ask, but it's going to work. I only want projects brought forward, and I only want to bring projects forward that are going to be approvable, whatever the rules happen to be. So we have to understand what the rules are up front to do it. So you got to know the bounds, that's the rules, design within the bounds, and remember that the rules are not just mathematics and physical things like metal and wires and motors and stuff like that. There's financial, there's political, and there's the physical component. We've got to remember that those are all parts of a successful project, and it's not just one of them. Another rule, and I mentioned this at the beginning, and I'll just emphasize again, It's financial. That's why we've got to have the financial hats. Taxes, rebates, depreciation, cash flow, timing, all of those pieces impact projects just as much as having the right size pipe for the air compressor, having the right size horsepower or other things. They're all components of that. Okay. I keep a set of rules of thumb that I use, and each of you can do the same if you're working with projects, is you got to kind of know if the project is even slightly feasible. So one, if I'm designing a project and I know that it's financial, I set up one of these rules that it has to, if it can make 15% interest over 10 years, I can probably find somebody, I can find the company itself will fund it. It might make their threshold and it might not. But I can find outside investors that are willing. That's a rate that seems to be acceptable to lots of investors. So that gives me the terms that if I can't make a project at least this good, I'm probably not going to be able to find an investor or get it done in-house. Got to move the needle. Decision makers don't really have a lot of time to work with things that don't move the needle. So bundling, just like you're bundling for telephones, bundling for cable TV, bundling a project so that the sum of the projects is going to be enough to make the decision maker want to do the project. So if you're working with a big company like ADM and you come to a project that's going to save $1,000, you're not going to get the attention of the COO, the CEOs, not going to get the attention of a lot of plant managers. So they're looking for something that's going to change it and that you put the work and the effort behind it that's going to get there. And then there's other ones like, people, I'm just constantly bombarded. Can I do solar? Can I do energy storage? Can I put in CHP? What about new metering systems? So if it's not within some of these bounds of these numbers and I can't get a good enough payback inside of that because of the electric or utility prices, but also they get the other way around where there's suppliers that come and say, we'll do this project for you, and then I'll reverse engineer what they're proposing and I'll find out that, they want $3,000 a kilowatt installed for the solar. Well, I know that that's way outside the bounds of what is available, that I know where I can get that price, so I can push that away. So you got to be a smart buyer, so you got to have some understanding of what are the thresholds, what are the best prices for things, so when you are bombarded by suppliers, you have some more sense for buying it. Okay. In the last sentence on here, I've found that a lot of my bigger projects have been able to move forward because I found someone else who's willing to, what they call DBOOM or design, build, own, operate, where they'll do the whole project and the company will be able to get a part of the savings and then the person who owns and operates it. It's been really successful because some of the bigger projects have a longer term payback, and I work with a lot of industrials just have this hard rule lots of times, 3 years or less is all I want to do. That's really common in the industrial world. It's not so much in schools and hospitals, but in that world it is. But there's a lot of DBOOM suppliers or people who will do the whole package that can easily go 5 to 7 years for projects. So it gives an alternative. If it doesn't meet the threshold of the 3 year and the company's not doing it, we just say, there's no project, we'll just close our eyes and we'll just miss getting that savings for the next 10 years, or present another possible solution. That other solution can be having a third party do it. Okay, you guys will have access to this presentation later, so I'm just going to sort of tell you what these slides mean. You can look at it later, but I'm going to switch. Those are some of my rules. The type of project that I've been working on quite a lot with customers, been working with hospitals, hotels, and industry recently over this last year, and a lot to do with demand management. So there's two types. There's your electricity, that's your base electricity cost, and then there's the demand. The demand is a pretty expensive part. If you look at this map, you'll see the dark sections. I mean, it can get over $30 a kilowatt for the demand charges. So managing demand charges is a pretty worthwhile thing to go after, not just after energy. So I started focusing on that and ways to do demand management and areas of the country where that's the most beneficial. And you can see, like time of use pricing, the prices of electricity vary. It's not this constant thing of 7 cents a kilowatt, 3 cents a kilowatt. I mean, all kinds of crazy cents a kilowatt. So understanding what those are and how to apply that is kind of an interesting, it's a financial, it's an engineering, it's a statistical model, and it's been quite interesting to work at. And if we can just slice off a piece of those demands, in this case, 250 kilowatts at this one factory, just slicing off these random demands is worth this, and this one was $40,000 a year. It's a good project and kind of a fun project to go after. Things that run at the same time, if you can see they don't run all the time because they run in batches, just not run them at the same time. This one was doing really good. See, we were able to map out what's the cost of electricity. And this plant, it's a refrigeration plant, started moving their stuff over. And so we still go through the same cycles, but we just don't do the cycles at the same time when electricity is most expensive. So it's a management tool, this one was. It wasn't any special equipment. Pumps. Here's an example. We spent $200,000 and get almost $500,000 back in savings from pumps. There's a lot of pumps in the world. Water treatment plants, water towers, industry, and the most pumps that we've checked thousands of pumps and not found too many of them that are in their efficiency curve. Air compressors. You have 2 brand new air compressors, but how you use them. One can just be partly loaded. Well, what if you could just use a little bit of electricity and not run that one at all? So you might not say, well, I just need to change my air compressor because it's partly loaded and it's not being efficient. Well, we could look in this one. It's using 114 CFM. It's about another. So that's like a handful of little tubes blowing air. If we could fix that, we could just not run that compressor. So understanding usage and metering is another thing that's helpful. Another one, drive up to this factory and see, wow, there's all these cooling towers. When I first started driving up, they were all going, and I was wondering why in the winter do we still have them all going the same as in the summer? It's colder. So we call it set point challenging. Do you really need what you're using? Another one, what do you see here? Make sure, I wanted the managers to be embarrassed to see this heat going out the roof. We were able to condense it and use the heat to preheat water and preheat air. But just, it's a more psychological thing, plastering this picture all over the company so they'd have to drive by it and say, this isn't the right thing to do. That gave us the thrust we needed to get permission to do the projects. And I'll close with this one. It's still about change management. What we need to do is, there's a lot of things in change management, but I highlighted this desire and belief. If you don't get the people that you're working with, company, clients, internal or external, if they don't desire or believe it, the chances are it's not going to go forward. So understand that, and work on it. You got to get them to that point. Once someone desires and believes it, they can make some amazing things happen that were just barriers before. With that, I think I used up my time.
Thanks a lot. Does someone have